Chris.
Hello, everybody. How you doing? Welcome to Within the Cauldron today. It's about men and witchcraft and how we view the craft as individuals, but also as a collective. We're going to jump into this cauldron and try to transform one another and also our audiences out there. Welcome, everybody. And
thank you.
We have Nico. We have Eric C. Friedman, Mike Nichols,
Hey there.
and Corrigan. Welcome. Blessed be. Thank you for coming on. I have a question to ask you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
I have a real good question to ask you guys. What is it like for you to be male witches within a feminist movement or seen as a feminist movement? Do you guys see it as a feminist movement, or do you see it as, you know, we're equal partners in a collective of the goddess and God? How do you guys see that? Anybody want to start out?
I don't mind starting out. For me, yes, it is a feminist movement, but I have to immediately talk about what we mean by the word feminist. That doesn't mean that women are on top. That, to me, feminist, if you go back to the people who first started talking about feminism and patriarchy, they were always versus matriarchy, they were always very careful to point out that when they were talking about those kind of things, using those terms, they were talking about egalitarianism. And if you go back to the work of Frederick Engels or J.J. Bachofen or any of those people, you'll always get the same. And so, yeah, I've considered myself a feminist from the very beginning, and I feel really comfortable there because I enjoy the idea that men and women are equal.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Equality is the key thing for me.
What was that, Eric?
Well, equality is the key thing for me. We've been swinging back and forth between matriarchy, patriarchy, and I'm more thelemic in this regard, that I see a time where that pendulum stops swinging and you just have balance. Now, I'm a cisgender, so I don't really have much of a dog in the fight other than the fact that I understand witchcraft as a feminine empowerment, not necessarily a feminine movement, because that's like assigning an entire gender identity to the movement, which is inappropriate to Wicca. It's more a response to where we were religiously in the midst of various world wars. So swinging back, back and forth between patriarchy and matriarchy it's the Hatfields and McCoys.
Yeah.
You can go on forever with it. We have to achieve a balance.
Wow. Yeah. I can
understand. In that regard, it's like I've always considered witchcraft a feminist empowerment, something that women can grab hold of and make themselves connect with the divine and be that intermediary between humans and the gods, humans and spirit, whatever the case. That was never a problem for me. you know. But I don't like to think of it as a feminist movement. Like I was joking earlier, is that all the major Wiccan movements are named after the men that started them, not the women. Although Doreen Valiente is a bigger name than Gerald Gardner for good reason.
No, I mean, Wicca and the witchcraft revival in the 70s and early 80s certainly had a feminist component
Yeah.
and a separatist component. The graybeards among us, which is most of us, remember the feminist separatist movement, which mostly flamed out in the 80s and 90s. But my early experience in the craft was always of a circumstance of relative equality. Where I began my craft work was a pretty ordinary kind of late 70s, early 80s initiatory coven in which the high priests tended to act like the men in a relationship, and the high priestesses tended to act like the women in a relationship of the period, though we all understood that in the end, it was the priestess who was in charge, and there were rules that gave the priestess real authority and power, which didn't happen in other religions. It made it clear that it was clear that women were meant to be empowered. Of course, we were limited by the culture in which we actually lived, especially in those early days. It was all very suburban, in fact. But that started to change, I think, in the larger pagan culture with the festival movement, which got people
Yeah.
out of their suburban living rooms and dancing naked around fires, which really changed the whole feel of the matter in its way.
Nico, you got
Yeah, when we
anything?
started developing,
Yeah. I think I'm going to be kind of the outlier here. I do agree that it is a feminist religion system as far as like the overarching pagan community. But I come from the weird side of it where I'm a Norse pagan, which is ironically male centric as far as it is more male dominant in its practices. At least in my experience, there's more males in Norse paganism than there are women. Um, but I've also been in Wiccan spaces and various other aspects. Um, I'm kind of an egalitarian on it as well, where I think that men and women are equal within the craft and that they're, of course, within the traditions like Wicca, the high priestess has control over the ceremony. And for Norse pagans, it kind of depends on if you have a Geithia or a Godai. It just depends on what your structure looks like, and it's equal parts. Like, or at least from in my experience, that the kindreds I've been in, we had a nomination, and whoever was elected for the kindred was who we got. I've had male and female on both, and they've both led rituals wonderfully.
And just to say so, I haven't identified under the word witch for really 30 years. I mean, is a
right?
magic user that leads rites for a community worshiping the old gods a witch? Well, if you ask the bishop, he would say yes. But I work in the paradigm of Arnriach Fein Druidry, ADF Druidry, which is broadly Euro-pagan and
Yep.
and very gender egalitarian. Can I take just a minute and tell you a story? Let me take just a minute and tell you a story. ADF was founded to be gender blind. In the 80s, when we began, that meant we literally paid no attention and things were just allowed to roll on. So by about 1995, almost all the leadership was male. In other words, the ordinary patterns of American society had asserted themselves. Women had stepped back, men had stepped forward. So some of the senior women in the organization undertook a series of women's retreats that functionally amounted to old school 70s. What did they call it? Consciousness raising, didn't they? Thunder, you remember, I bet. And it worked greatly. Women.
Yeah, I do.
Women sitting in a room together without men.
Remember Lilith's magazine?
It worked great, and within, I don't want to give real dates, but within half a decade, women have been. We're all electoral. Our stuff in ADF, our leadership is all electoral. So women, within a half a decade, women have been standing for offices, and presently, for instance, our priesthood is probably about 55% female. And we're about to elect our first female archdruid. I would say since 1984, it's about time. So you can say you're gender blind, but if you don't actively promote the I don't know how to. Women. Let's be specific. If dual gender organizations don't actively provide opportunities for women to lead, the social tendency is for it not to happen so readily. So Witchcraft did that automatically, or Wicca, let me say. Wicca did that automatically. That was built into their mythic system. That was my little story.
Wow. Interesting. For me, I guess I am gender blind because within our covenstead, the high priestess rules for half a year, and I rule for a half a year being the high priest. Do you guys have a very similar?
I can follow the logic of that.
Yeah, we don't have priests, and we don't have high priests and high priestesses. 20 years ago, our female clergy voted to call themselves priests.
Okay.
All of our clergy are called priests, regardless of gender. And we don't assign a high priest and high priestess to circles, to groves, to ritual groups.
Okay.
We have a once-a-year election, so we reevaluate all of the scribe, the council members, and everybody. If you want to release your position, they go back up for a vote and they get redistributed. Because you get tired of doing the same aspects, and sometimes you want to be in the ritual and not lead the ritual and everything else. So give people an opportunity to enjoy all the aspects of everything.
And Nico, your system is non-initiatory.
Correct.
All right.
As is ADF. ADF has a path of initiation, but it's totally unconnected to organizational authority.
Okay, I guess I'm going to be the odd man out here.
I
haven't really talked about my tradition, but I think I should. I think, Nico, you said you were Norse based.
Yep.
Mine. Now, currently, I'm not in a group, but when it was active, the Covenant of New Gwynedd, as you might expect from the name, was Welsh traditionalist, and so we were on the Celtic side of things. And I have a feeling that it had at some point been imprinted by Gardnerian templates, I guess you might say, because we had the high priestess was considered always the head of the coven, and the high priest was in a supportive mode, but basically they were considered equal in authority. And in any kind of vote within the coven, nobody's vote, including the high priestess and high priest, nobody's vote counted for any more than anybody else's vote. If you were, everybody's was equal. And one of the things that we stress, which we considered part of our mythological background, were the Arthurian legends and the whole idea of the round table, and the idea that if you're sitting at a round table, there's no head of the table, that every person at the table is equidistant from the center, and their opinion matters just as much as the next person. Nobody has true authority in that sense. It's all equivalent. So, and I wanted to go back to something that Eric said earlier too. Yeah, I do see feminist Wicca or traditions as being feminine or female empowering, but I also see it as male empowering, because when you take a feminist stand, suddenly men are free to experience things, to get out of the stereotypical cultural boxes that Western civilization has put us into. And we can express things like, sadness, weakness. Sometimes we may be the ones that need support. There are lots of times when I want to bounce things off my high priestess and say, these are my ideas, but I want the feminine side of this too. Tell me about it. And I look at all of that as, again, egalitarian, and the two, both masculine and feminine, as being in total balance. And I think from the other Welsh traditionalist covens I've run into, that is kind of a hallmark of those groups. They all are kind of Arthurian round table oriented. So even though they have a titular high priestess and high priest. Does that make sense?
Those are more ritual positions. Mike, is that Welsh with only eyes like Eddie Buzinski out of New York?
My own tradition cannot be traced to that one. Okay. In fact, it gets very blurry as you start tracing it backward. So yeah, a lot of them do, and I'm very bad at having. I can't really present a decent pedigree, but there are. All I can tell you is all of the gods and goddesses, and this came along. We were basically doing rituals that were patterned after the Gardnerian rituals for the most part, but none of the gods or goddesses that we used were any gods or goddesses you would find outside of reading the Mabinogion. So, and a lot of our traditions too are, if you read books on Welsh folk tradition and so forth, you'll see a lot of things connected with that. So I know a lot of it is pre-Gardnerian, but at some point, I think whatever the remnants of that Welsh tradition was, probably picked up copies of Gardner's book and said, "Oh, this is nice," and started doing a lot of the same kind of, put that imprint on top of the Welsh traditions. So that's just a guess on my part.
We could, if we weren't in public, we could try exchanging passwords. My Wiccan initiation was from a descendant of the NECTW out of Connecticut, New England Covenant Traditionalist Wicca, whence Eddie Buzinski emerged.
Ed Buczynski was,
moved to New York
and
founded
Welsh trade.
And the Minoan tradition and all of that. I was initiated by his initiation. No, that's not right. I was initiated by his initiatory brother, Eddie Buzinski. So none of that matters, except it might have been a connection, Mike. If it isn't, well.
Well, it establishes a connection with me because I'm also Gwyneth, just by virtue of living on Long Island.
Yeah,
of course.
A lot of Welsh traditional. And by the time I was initiated in Rhode Island, they were doing Gaelic, and as a result, my ongoing ethnic focus in all of this remains Irish mythology and Irish pagan ways, which fits very well in our ADF Druidry. But we also do Norse and Hellenic.
Oh, you're ADF. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I am. I've been more Druid than witchy for decades now, but there's really only a conceptual difference. Hey, let's try the question.
Oh yeah, we have.
It's
Go
not,
ahead, Nick.
It's not
We
an
have-
easy, really enlightening question, but it's a
Omni
question that-
Collective with Hello Humans, describe the differences between witches and warlocks. Well, I guess to start, break down the etymology. So witches come from the Old English,
Just
which
go to the
comes from
etymology.
witcha, and that was simply a practitioner of magic.
Yeah.
And warlocks.
Warlock. The term warlock definitely has a negative connotation because it means oathbreaker.
Means
And
oathbreaker.
it's definitely in terms of like someone who would accept the sacraments and then go out and do pagan magic.
Right. The oath that's being broken is your baptismal oath, mostly in warlock, and thus you end up a sorcerer. I always liked it. When I was a kid, I loved the word. But the word warlock is entirely out of fashion. The word warlock has no actual or traditional use in modern pagan magic and witchcraft.
No, only from accusatory texts.
Some guys like to call themselves warlocks because it's a cool word. The real medieval English word for a male witch in the trial age was wizard.
Wizard, yes.
Right.
Witches and wizards were who the church was trying in those days. So there is no difference between witches and warlocks because warlock is basically a fictional idea.
Right. And
as for the people who insist on calling themselves that, they won't like it.
I know. I literally had that conversation today on Facebook.
Ooh, this is a good one.
The short answer is yes to that question.
For Colleen White Owl, quick question: women can be ordained and recognized as priests, pastors, ministers.
Quick question, quick
in
answer.
Any of them. I want to say every pagan tradition, you can if they have, or even if they don't have federally recognized like 501(c)(3) status, you can still serve as priestess, priest with the X, however that person may identify as that. And then if the church has 513 status, of course, ministry, I'm an ordained minister as well. And depending on where you get your ordination from, your clinical title may change. But if you go through like you can, I think you pay the extra $5 and you can choose from like 300 different official clergy titles.
You don't mean you mean ULC.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not you.
Oh, yep. No, you're right.
That's a different thing.
I mean,
yep. You use the Christian church.
Cups is not part of this conversation.
You use only sort of a Christian church.
Yep.
But yes, in our pagan order, in ADF, women are regularly ordained, serve equally with men. It's just not an issue.
Now, actually, part of this conversation is based in the idea that, you
minorities.
might think that only women could be ordained and recognized as priests or pastors, ministers, and the craft. So, I mean, that's a weird question to be asked, but it's actually the opposite question is the one we're trying to answer.
Now, in my tradition, an initiation was the same as an ordination, basically. If you were initiated into the coven, then you were an ordained priest or priestess at that point.
Right. Not that we
that's
understood
Gardnerian and Alexandrian tradition, yes.
Not that we understood what that meant in those days. I don't think. When we make a first degree witch and call them priest and witch, I don't think that means what a lot of, I think that needs a lot of qualification. Gardner imagined a circumstance in which circles of initiates went forth and acted as priests among the peasants.
Yeah.
That's what he meant. That's what he meant in his imagined witchcraft, was that these were the wise people of various villages who would then coven up at need in order to do coveny stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you guys, I'm going to ask this question here. I might be opening up a can of worms.
Oh boy, worms.
Yeah, I love
Oh
worms.
boy. Okay,
I'm
we'll
waiting
say
with bated
Hey,
breath.
Chuck.
here that might be thrown back at me. When you guys are in your covering settings, what do you look for in a high priestess? What do you really want to see this individual to be?
Could you repeat that? Because did you say high priest or high priestess?
High priestess. I know as
Okay.
men, we should know what we should look for within ourselves, being a high priest or a priest or a member of a coven who's leading ritual in a masculine sense. But a
Right.
lot of times,
Okay, I just want to make sure I had priest and priestess distinguished.
Well,
Because after we started the Beltane Festival in Long Island, I ended up starting my own group separate from the coven that I was in, which is an Alexandrian coven. So I started setting up public circles and classes, like just one per month, just to get people out of their house and together.
Yeah.
And so I can't claim like third degree or anything like that. Although I'm recognized as an elder in Long Island, which to me means something. To anyone who doesn't know Long Island, who the fuck cares?
Yeah.
Sorry about my language, but I had a successful course, and people trusted me. But what I looked for in a priestess was someone who was connected. And I know you guys know what I mean.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain it. But it's just, you can feel something about like this parody is gonna work. And that's what Wicca, British traditional Wicca is all about, the polarity, right?
That's what
So
I was
and I'm a Kabbalist personally, so the polarity was always important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that if I established that polarity, that was it. Sexual, not sexual, didn't mean anything.
I'm going to guess that
the polarity.
I'm going to guess that both Nico and I work in ritual systems that don't rely on polarity.
Correct.
There is no the ritual work that I do and what I know of the Norse Blot. There is no metaphysical energy raising between male and female persons involved in the creation of the blessing.
Yep.
All right. You said male and female persons.
Yeah.
But how about male and female energies?
As far as deities go,
It's not the same thing as
depends on.
persons on the ground.
I'm concerned with gendered energies. I'm concerned with gendered energies. Not
all right. See that because that's why I picked out people on the ground.
Yeah, and it very much depends on the holiday, on who we're invoking.
That's also true. Yes, and that's why I could totally respect what you were saying about you reigning for half of the year while Chrissy reigns for the other half.
Yeah.
That made total sense to me. The dark and light halves, or God half and goddess half.
Well, when I was trained, it was about God, the harvest Lord, submitting his power to the goddess. It's very important. Well, for me, because I do follow the wheel of the year, and I have an understanding that for me, it is very masculine. It is very feminine. I can't be one without the other.
Exactly.
The great dance has to continue. It's very important for me that these Sabbaths are followed. The structure. and recognizing the great feminine, but also understanding the great masculine within yourself. You know, for a lot of us, we're either gay, bisexual, or straight. Where do we fall in at? You
Well,
Well,
know,
going back to your original question about what do you look for in a high priestess, in our tradition, we were, of course, a secretive, initiatory mystery religion. And the high priestess typically chose one, typically a younger woman in the coven, to be her handmaiden. And that was usually seen as kind of a high priestess in training role. And
Yeah.
so when our high priestess got to the age where she felt that she was ready to step down, and that was typically one of the most
Right back.
beautiful ceremonies that we would ever have. You know, there's not a dry eye in the house when that happens. The high priestess would step down and pass, and at that point she would become an elder. And in our tradition, elder was defined as anyone who had been a past high priestess or high priest. Now, she would step down, and then the handmaiden would become the new high priestess. And she then would pick whoever she wanted to be her high priest. So she might pick the same man who had been high priest before the previous high priest, but a lot of times they're talking about this polarity thing. There would be a lot of quote perfect couples within our tradition, and so if the handmaiden had a young man who was her partner, oftentimes she would pick him to be the new high priest. And then both the old high priestess and old high priest would become elders of the coven. As far as the quality that it was looked for, it was more. I think we kind of all thought of the high priestess and the high priest really, and as first among equals, as the French would say. They were equals, but they were the ones who. Well, let me get at this like through a metaphor. A symphony orchestra, like who's most important? You know, is it first violin or second oboe or whatever? They're equally important, but somebody stands at the front of the group and holds the baton and gets them all moving in the same direction. That was the role of the high priestess and high priest. And they typically tended to be kind of mother figures.
Masters of ceremony.
Yes.
Sorry.
And that's a good way to put it, or mistress of ceremonies. They were the mothers of the coven, and people brought their problems to them, and they just kind of helped to solve anything that was wrong within the coven and iron out hurt feelings if that happened, and all of that. And I guess that's why there was not, like with some newer coven groups, there were like they would hold elections and replace or sometimes even have rotating high priests and high priestesses, and we would have never done that because it was important for us to have a single focus in those positions, so that we could all channel our efforts, our magical energies through the two who led the coven.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, that's the.
I know that's probably very different.
It does make sense.
That's the
Probably very different than what you guys have been doing, but
no, that's
it's more or less how we've been doing it, for years.
Yeah, that's the specific magical formula of that system, really.
Right.
I think the let's have elections impulse started, at least in Ohio, with Starhawk and the publication of Spiral Dance, which gave everybody permission to do whatever they damned well pleased and call it Wicca. And then was she before or after Cunningham, who really gave everybody permission to do as they damned well pleased? They'd call it Wicca.
Now,
I'm sorry.
I've got a question, and
I
I
wish
kind of
I.
can I bring up a
I'll
question?
just say before I stop talking that I wish Scott Cunningham had called his book Paganism,
Yeah,
A Guide for the Solitary Practitioner. It
Yeah.
would have done Wicca a lot more good.
So I've got a question, and I'm probably maybe Nico would be the one to answer this, but it seems to me like as I'm watching people being drawn to our practices in recent years, I see a lot of the males being drawn to the Norse side of things, and the females are more carrying on the Celtic side of things. Is that a fair observation? And if it is, why?
Odin Morrigan.
I can agree with that, but I think that it has a lot to do with pop culture, where there is in the last 10 years a bunch of shows about um, Nordic cultures
American
and shows like
Gods.
Viking, American Gods, and the guys kind of look at the rough and tumble Viking, and they get this idea in their head that this is what a Norse pagan practice looks like, when for a lot of us it's not. And I won't say that there are not some aggressive Norse pagans out there. There absolutely are. And I think that
Is
um,
aggressive euphemism?
I mean, it could be, but I mean, like these are your sandpaper. Their personalities are very type A, very go getter, very quick to anger,
Would
and
be alphas.
yeah, yeah, and as well as with the I think broadly with the women in my generation and younger, that they have a very much draw towards the reclamation of power and seeking that through the dark goddesses, through like the Morgan and um, even in
Sasquatch.
other pantheons like Lilith, or I see tons of Morgan, Lilith, Freya, like they're they're gravitating towards these darker goddesses because
Mhm.
of the connotations that these are powerful women, and I absolutely agree with that. And but I do see that quite a bit, that they're most of the female practitioners that I know are Celtic pagans, and a large chunk of the men that I know that are um, within my scope are Norse pagans or possibly Celtic pagans. I know a couple males that are Celtic pagans. One's in the Druid path, but I also know a lot of women who are in the Norse side, but they fall into the vulva side of it. So they're. I guess I should elaborate that I also practice modern witchcraft. So while I'm religiously a Norse pagan, I also practice witchcraft in like the modern sense. But the these women are taking on kind of the Norse pagan aspect of the Seeress and the Seder traditions, and there's a huge revival in Seder, which I absolutely love. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful practice.
A Northern European Oracle of Delphi.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, Delphi is remembered because it was real famous, but the pagan world was just full of oracles.
Mhm.
You know,
Yep.
little kid
Sacred
oracles.
Springs.
Some priestess who 3 times a year does an oracle thing, and it's still true in India.
Right.
Hindu paganism still, village to village, still full of oracle women.
The weird.
Never stopped. Well, see, that's the thing. This stuff never stopped in India to this day. None of this stuff ever stopped in India. Um, they're still doing all the things we're talking about, including polarity-based secret circles of naked initiates in India. That's one of the ways to do tantra, and that's still going on. But so, Nico, you brought up something that I am fascinated by in the modern occult scene.
Mhm.
And that is the notion of modern witchcraft as somehow separate from either ethnic paganism or Wicca. What did you mean?
So, I guess what I mean by it is that, so in Norse paganism, outside of doing rune work, men aren't typically associated with practicing much in the way of what we consider witchcraft. So I wanted to add in there that I also do witchcraft,
What do you
but
mean?
um, well, it's technically separate for me
Egil
because
Skallagrimsson.
I'm a Dutch folk practitioner, so I practice Dutch folk magic as well
Dutch.
as being a Norse pagan.
You like Dutch stuff?
Dutch like Danish.
They say Pennsylvania Dutch say Dutch, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the
German.
Which is
Pennsylvania
Germanic,
Dutch.
yeah.
Yeah, and then Deutsch, which is the German.
A little north, but the Palatinate Germans say Dutch.
Mhm.
Yeah, the
Interesting.
Dutch in Pennsylvania Dutch is actually
Conjure. So
Deutsche.
you're talking about a style of Germanic folk conjure.
Yep.
What you're referring to as witchcraft.
Yep. Yes. Which
I
they
am generally annoyed at the effort to detach the word witchcraft from pagan religion.
I agree with you.
And
And
I don't believe there has ever been a magic system that wasn't directly attached to the religion it grew out of.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I agree
I have a
too.
fascination
That's
with
reasonable.
the people that claim secular witchcraft, because it's a very intriguing phenomena to me, or people that consider themselves atheopagans.
Okay, that's a
Where
new terminology. What does that
I
mean?
Yeah,
know.
what?
So an atheopagan is essentially a person who holds no belief or veneration of a deity or entity, but still partakes in the rituals and the raising of energy without the belief in a higher power of any sort.
Or,
They're atheistic pagans.
Non-material, yeah.
Yep.
Whatever. It's people who just can't, forgive me, it's people who just can't stand to abandon their hipster secularism.
I could see that, yeah.
Well,
It's an interesting phenomena, though.
There would be.
I had to go Google it when somebody
Listen
was like,
to
"This
the
is what I do."
dogmatic males saying what's what.
Some of that is accurate. You do not see a lot of women. You do not see a lot of women protecting atheopaganism. That is so.
I think we just proved the women right.
okay. Here's the
I'm
question.
sorry, but the first time I came across the idea of atheistic pagans, I was like, isn't that kind of an oxymoron?
I know, and I'm sitting there like, I guess, like,
no,
if you're really into the placebo effect and you want to dig yourself into this rabbit hole, I mean, I could see where you can convince yourself that, like, from a placebo effect standpoint, that it has a beneficial psychological effect.
Right.
Mhm.
And I can appreciate that, but I don't get
would
it.
understand the pagan people of that age doing that for that reason,
Yeah.
but they wouldn't use those words because they're big words.
Yeah.
They would use different words, and that's where mythology comes from.
In ancient times, they didn't ask each other what they believed.
That's right.
There's nobody, that never would occur to you. Somebody standing next to you singing the same song as you, then they're in the same religion as you for at least that afternoon. And that's all you need to worry about.
It was all about the
I've got a
praxis.
story about that, but
the question
this
is
is not the right crowd for it.
your opinion of the real nature of the gods would be something that might come up in the beer hall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But not in context of actual performance of religion. It's just not paganism isn't about what you believe in.
Right. I always thought that that's one of the reasons Stuart Farrar didn't write a book called What Witches Believe. He wrote What Witches Do.
Yeah. Now, I got a question to ask you guys while we're on this topic. we all believe in the God and Goddess. We also believe in our roots, our ancestry through our lineage. What would you tell today's practitioner about hereditary witchcraft, lineage witchcraft, versus today's neo-pagan witchcraft? How would you guys talk to them about what is the right path? Or is there a right path? Is this the new growth toward, our path?
That's the question.
I do not believe that there is any witchcraft that descends earlier than Gerald Gardner. I do not believe that any of our traditions come out of the countryside authentically.
Interesting.
I would disagree with that.
I would disagree as well.
Out of books. I believe that our traditions have been assembled out of books by scholars, perfected by experimentation, and serve just fine. But it's a question of style. If what you want is to feel like you're an initiated adept, then by all means, go find yourself a coven that'll make you feel that way. If what you want is to...
It would be best if you actually joined an initiatory society.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. Go find the right kind of coven. I did. Back in the 80s, I did.
Right.
That's what I wanted. But
if you want the initiatory experience, get initiated.
But it's a question of style. I mean, if what you want is to worship the gods in peace and go about your business, you may not need to submit to coven discipline.
Yeah.
In order to have an enjoyable paganism. It really is it's a question of what you're after. I mean, fortunately, there's a menu now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think for me it's a bit different.
A buffet.
Because I have...
Yeah, when I got involved, and this is, it's humorous, but it's pertinent to the conversation tonight. My initiations follow the procession of the aeons. So I was first, the aeon of Isis, I was initiated into Wicca. Then Osiris, the aeon of Osiris, I became a Freemason. Then finally, I joined the OTO. So that's the aeon of Horus. So my initiations actually follow the procession. And in my head followed my initiations. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah, it does.
Well, it should actually.
Yeah.
Now, Mike,
but that's the thing is that's why I'm not so caught up into the matriarchy versus patriarchy thing. We got to get past this polarity or dichotomy or opposition or however you want to describe it. It's just yang and yin or yin and yang. I mean, let's not play favorites.
Same deal.
Well, somebody.
But that's really what it comes down to. It's not masculine and feminine. It's just yang and yin.
Somebody mentioned that we have so much on the menu now, and I would agree with that. That it becomes almost like a smorgasbord, and I'm kind of morphing.
That's what I called a buffet.
Yeah, it is, and I'm kind of morphing the question, the way it started out, into the differences between an eclectic approach as opposed to a more traditionalist approach. It seems today that almost everybody I run into embraces the idea of eclecticism. Yep. And don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of comparative religion and theology and liturgics. Big fan of Joseph Campbell. I think we can learn a lot about our own traditions by comparing them to other traditions.
Yep.
At the same time, it often seems to me, and I'm going to apologize. I'll apologize because I know this is going to be offensive to some people, that their eclecticism means that they just kind of grab whatever's in front of them and they don't ever take a really deep dive into any one tradition. And I kind of
I am
feel that
100% behind you on that.
Yes.
I think that's a sad thing, because
100%
everybody
behind you.
gets to know, I like to say they're master of all trads, and
Jack of
no,
all
no,
trades.
jack of all trads
Jack of all
and
trades is a
master of
great
none.
name.
Full trads.
Jack of all
Yeah.
trades is a screen name that I want now.
And I just think, yeah, it's great to have a basis in an eclectic viewpoint, but at the same time, I feel like so much lore and mythology and lineage and what has come before. And I'm sorry, I do disagree that I think a lot of what our praxis is does go way back before Gardner, and a lot of that is getting lost because people don't do the deep dives into a particular tradition.
Agreed.
I agree with you, Mike, because my path has always been Strigaria, and I believe in that magic that comes forth that has been handed down to each individual of our tradition.
Yeah.
I believe in that because
Oh,
for
absolutely.
me it has transformed my life. It is magically, if I look at my family and the magic that the goddess has done with us, each one of my children are successful. Each one of my children are successful, and I'm proud of it because one, they prayed to the goddess. Two, they was willing to get out there and work that magic physically within the mundane.
And
And
live
what
it.
God is calling, it's not just within my ears, it's within my blood.
You know, I'll tell you a story that I say in this context. This stuff is an art, right?
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
magic art, and the practice, the actual practice of personal spirituality, as opposed to just wanting it and reading about it and attending the occasional workshop. The actual practice of personal spirituality is an art. Like any art, people are going to be interested at different levels, and you cannot fault them for their level of interest.
That's a very good point.
In ADF, our assumption is that we are running a temple for a village, and we expect people to show up, get a blessing, go home, come back when they want, and some of us will decide to become hobbyists, and then specialists, and then maybe priests and priestesses, or other specialists inside the organization. But most people will never be specialists. And what has happened, Wicca 1973 was all specialists, all hobbyists. In order to dig your way into a coven and get somebody to say yes and commit to coven discipline and do the do, you had to be a hobbyist. There was no congregation. It was all initiates, and that stage is over.
Yeah, because nowadays
the old days of
online,
D&D and Markland and SCA.
Well, hey, that was 1973. I was in the SCA in 1973.
Right.
My first initiated witches in the Middle Kingdom.
I just remember a bunch of people using it as a cover organization.
Before pagan festivals, the SCA was where to meet witches. Yes, it was.
Oh, Scott.
So by 1982, like witches around Rites of Spring in Boston wanted to wear their athames on their belt. I don't know if you've ever actually walked around wearing a
by 82, I split to Israel.
It feels great to walk around wearing a dagger on your belt. I was like, I got over that in the SCA. I don't need to wear my ritual dagger on my belt in a sheath. But that impulse, that Ren Fair impulse, has always been part of it. But we're at a point now where we have to serve a self-selected audience of variously interested amateurs.
That's a really good way of putting it.
That really is. I mean, our job in ADF, we're a public pagan church. I mean, there are initiatory and esoteric ways to go if you commit. But our job is to create ceremonies that make people go home feeling blessed, and that's the point of the work. And that's all they have to do: show up, open your heart, get a good blessing. That's what we tell them.
I've been tossing in initiatory language and symbolism into my circles, and we went through more than a full year of it, and it caught. So that if you sneak it in, it'll catch.
Yeah.
No, I was not sneaking it in. I was telling them, look, this is how it works.
Try to do good theurgic invocation and good good sacramental magic and other stuff that use our esoteric skills to power working religion.
See, I can agree with Mike and Ian.
That's the thing, is administering the sacraments.
Yeah.
And that's a weird phrase to hear in a pagan context, but it's something with a pagan origin. Administering the sacraments.
Yeah, even the word sacrament is pagan in origin.
Yeah.
The mass is basically the mass is basically a theurgic ritual of blessing.
Yeah.
Theurgic.
Straight out of 4th century Hermeticism, carefully combed, orthodox.
The difference in my view, though, is that the difference between public, I mean, you're talking about an outward facing public service, basically, as opposed to an inward facing initiatory, not a public, but a secretive initiatory group that is a mystery religion, and it's not open to the public. And again, I'm probably informed by my experiences, which go way back to 1970. But I've yet to have anything in a public ritual. I've yet to have anything even close to what I've experienced in a close personal ritual within just a coven. For one thing, I don't like public rituals because to me it requires me to drop my shields with people that I've maybe only just met that day, and I certainly don't know them, and I don't like the feeling of being that open to magical energies from people that I don't know. So to me, well, let me tell a story for as an example. I was at a large public pagan festival, and it was led by somebody who should have known how to lead a large public pagan festival. I won't name names, but I will tell you that as I was walking away, well, first of all, the ritual fell flat. It was a highly choreographed ritual among people who were not rehearsed, not prepared, and it fell flat. And I happened to be in the company of Morning Glory Zell at the time. And as we turned and walked away from the ritual, she turned to me and said, sotto voce, their hearts were pure, but their theater was lousy.
The Zells knew that stuff too. The Zells made a point of not doing lousy theater.
There's so many things that touches on my life and my experience that makes total sense to me.
ADF ritual was invented behind our boredom with public pagan ceremonies at festivals. I mean, we got rid of a lot of stuff that had gotten in the way. We have simple rules like, well, for one thing, our rituals are designed for 30 to 50 people on the face of it. And we don't always get that many, but often we do. We have a rule. No ritual element is ever done one person at a time.
Say it again?
If everybody when we give a blessing into cups, there's 4 pitchers going out from the work table. We're filling the cups as fast as we can go, and no waiting in line, no none of that stuff. Oh, I was at I'll just say a pagan spirit gathering ritual one time where 500 people were waiting in line for a series of tarot oracles from individuals.
Ouch.
Wow.
No.
Wow.
They were going for something real esoteric. And those people working the 4 oracular tarot stands were working their asses off all night.
Oh,
I feel bad for those readers. Gee.
And the people waiting in line for how long?
Yeah.
I used the portisane. I came back to my wife who was holding my place.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Anyway, public pagan ritual at festivals is often not a good example of anything. But no doubt about that. If you ever get a chance to see an ADF ritual worked, it's different. It's different. It's not Wicca at all. We don't cast a circle. It's not. It's not post grimoire.
Those big public pagan rituals reminds me of what has often been said about dinner theater being for people who don't like theater and who don't like dinner. So.
They wouldn't go to socialize.
That's up to
right.
You want to talk. That's up to the clergy. That's up to the ritual leaders to engage the back row, to have big enough props and cool enough things happening to draw people's attention. I like having kids at the ceremony because then you can tell whether you have people's attention.
Yeah.
Our Long Island Beltane Festival lasted for 25 years. 25 years our Long Island Beltane Festival lasted. And it was started by my coven.
Very good.
And I had the bright idea of saying, well, why don't we have lecturers and vendors? 25 years of that.
There you go.
And then she kind of like pushed me aside. There's a bunch of people who need some guidance here because the cup scoop had just folded.
Yeah.
And that's how I ended up with my own group, but not a 3rd degree.
We've made it out.
This is really interesting. The way
our first ritual was the Samhain ritual in after the 9/11. That was our initiatory ritual.
So, can I ask you guys a question about? Do you think initiations are still important or relevant within the craft, within witchcraft or any other path?
I guess I'll go first on this. I think in my generation and younger, absolutely not. There's very few people that are interested in pursuing traditions. They're going with eclectic paganism or reconstructionist or recreationist pagan movements. They're steering further away from tradition bases. There's also a large policing of initiatory practices, and some of the younger generations
that was the word.
Don't like the gatekeeping that is involved around them. They want people. This will ruffle people that are younger than me a bit, but they want to be spoon-fed. They want instant gratification, and that's unfortunately the nature of where the younger generations are going on things. At least from my observation, they want the spells now. They don't want to work for it, and they don't want to learn the context of the deities. They just want, who do I work with? How do I do it? And when am I supposed to see the results? And that's all they care about, which is really sad to me. But I do have an appreciation for initiatory religions, and I think that, at least for me, I worked for 18 years to get to the point that I am in my practice, where I've put in the research, I've put in academic educations into it. I've gone out of my way to study different traditions. And for me, it was worth it. Like, I feel like I earned my place where I'm at. And then I have people coming to me wanting me to give them the instant gratification of, I want you to fix this right now, and I don't care about whatever. And it's really upsetting because it's like, you don't understand the magical theory, you don't
Right.
understand anything. You want me to give you a commercialized spell essentially and
And
send you off.
we're not allowed to just take their money anymore.
They get mad about that.
For 300 years, we would have just said, sure, I'll help you with that. And we'd go quietly into the back room and burn something smelly and take their $300.
And now I'm over here like,
They would
okay,
get exactly what their level of understanding rated for them. I'm just being cynical. Never mind me.
but no, I absolutely agree. Whereas sitting there like, it's intriguing, but
Nico, I could not agree with you more. I was on a panel discussion at Heartland Pagan Festival some years ago with Janet Farrar, Gavin Bone, and Ed the Pagan. And one of the questions the moderator proposed to us was, is witchcraft going to continue or is it going to die out? And of course, I was the only one of the four who said it was going to die out. And I said that based
Sorry,
on
Nico.
several things. I was at the time I was doing a lecture on spiritualism, and I remembered how the religion of spiritualism had absolutely swept the United States after the Fox sisters and all of that. And we had seances in the White House with Abraham Lincoln and mediums like Nettie Colburn Maynard and so forth. And nobody would have thought that religion would ever go away. And yet it faded away pretty quickly.
Mhm.
And later on, though, I kind of started thinking about my answer, and I thought, I feel like now, looking back, I was both right and wrong, because the witchcraft that I grew up with, yeah, it has already died out. I don't recognize what I see anymore with the younger generation as being what I practiced. And quite frankly, I'm not really interested in what they're doing. So in that sense, it did die out. But something that they're calling witchcraft is gonna
Leak and
continue.
everyone's camera's failing.
Pardon?
What was that?
I
you
didn't.
cut out there. What'd you say?
Don't send me.
Is his connection failing?
Might be buffering.
Zooming in and out, fading in and out here.
Hello? Are you still there?
Yeah, I
I'm
think
still
his connection might be coming in and out.
Okay. Well, anyway, my final point there
Now we
was
hear you.
I think something called witchcraft is going to continue to go forward,
At least
but
in
it's
my
not
case,
anything that I
I
recognize.
just took a leak.
Yeah, since I started this podcast, I have came across so many different labels of witchcraft. I'm an elemental witch. I'm a cosmic witch. And it's like,
so many identifiers.
to be honest with you, I'm sitting there going, what the heck is all of these labels? What is it?
You got get.
Uh-oh.
We actually lost him.
But what do you guys feel about today's witch who says, I'm this, I'm that, I'm the other thing?
I go back though on the initiation thing and serious practitioners, which is I think what we're really talking about. I mean, like, you can mourn the loss of the style of witchcraft you enjoyed in your youth, and I understand that. There's a lot I miss about coven work in my public churchy paganism that I do now. But my metaphor of art or music still stands. In music, the majority of people are going to be listeners.
Yep.
They're gonna participate on a listening level. Perhaps they'll become fans. Perhaps they'll have artists styles that they really like. Some of them will then actually decide to play an instrument. Probably, what percent do you think? Maybe 20, and maybe some will actually decide to play an instrument, and some will actually form a band. So, three things that are very much the same: a musical band, a coven, and a group marriage.
Yeah.
And the chances of putting one of those together and making it work for 10 years is about the same in all cases. It's just not to be expected to happen, except when people who are real hobbyists, real committed people, make it happen. I think initiatory Wicca will continue in the background as long as there are people who dig it. And I know there are still people out there who dig it and who are doing it and who are initiating 30-year-olds.
I think that witchcraft's become more casual. Well, as it's become trending in recent times, it's become more casual. You have more people doing they may. I agree with your metaphor with musicians, where they may dabble in tarot, they may be an herbalist, they may do birth charts, this or that, or they may collect crystals and look at the metaphysical properties, but they pick parts that are comfortable for them, and they don't drop headfirst into the entire practice.
Right.
And I think that it kind of is what it is. Does it sadden me to a level? Yeah, I'm passionate about witchcraft and paganism as a whole, and I wish that more people would jump headfirst into it in any tradition aspect.
Right. Mm-hmm. You can always tell when somebody's serious because they're willing to do the painful part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, that comes down to learning to play the guitar. If you stop when your fingers hurt, you're done.
Yep.
Well, that's it. That really does sum it up real well. When your fingers hurt, you're done. That's really
people never get beyond that in their vague effort to decide to learn to play an instrument.
Can't tell you how many times I've had a witch tell me their spell didn't work and they stopped practicing, and I'm sitting here like, so you had one prayer that went unanswered and you stopped?
Right. So you didn't hit the wires upright once, and you don't think electricity works.
Yeah. I find a lot of people do that. They're not willing.
Fuse is blown, therefore electricity doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a long answer to an atheo-pagan once. It's on my blog. And he was complaining. He complained that he couldn't tell magic from religion. He complained that people were like, magic doesn't always work, but somehow he didn't get that science only works if you do everything perfectly.
Yeah.
In magic, we imagine that we can throw in a different herb or use another stone. Sometimes you can't because it's art, not science. But it's still a lot like science, and if you don't do it right, whatever right means that week, if you don't do it right, it isn't going to work. Sorry, that's not even a topic we were on.
That's all right.
Oh no, I agree with you there. Like, magic's like baking, where you throw all the ingredients together and you might get a cake, but if you beat everything too hard, you're going to end up with scrambled eggs.
Right. Get a bowl of goo.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Right. There we go.
All the
I tried to make conditions recently.
Oh,
That's what they ended up with.
All the weak ideation around magic, intention is everything, and all you got to do is, it doesn't matter what the ingredients are as long as your intention is right. Now I'm just cranking.
I think it was it H. Ballard?
Well, you can reduce it to really simple terms that can't, really be.
H. Ballard said everybody can light a candle and put a bay
I'm not
leaf in
in.
it.
I'm a ceremonial magician on a certain level, but on a Wiccan level, I mean, I want to be able to set up my circle anywhere I want, and I just need a deck of cards to do it.
There you go.
And I don't even need the deck of cards.
That's a thing.
They're just really good props.
I'm just in the process of building a new shrine. I'm just in the process of building a new indoor shrine right here in my library as I rework my space. I like having a shrine to do daily devotions. My practice is very...
Yeah, I understand. I'm doing the same, actually.
I do ritual magic when it's called for, but my personal practice is very kind of shrine devotional and meditative.
Yeah, that's
Same.
the way it is.
Me too.
Yep, I have my devotionals and then I do
So
spell
yeah,
work.
it's very personal to me. It's in my personal space.
I like spellcraft. I like to do spellcraft when necessary, but I feel like the regular blessing of the gods prevents me from having to do spellcraft up one side and down the other.
Yeah, I feel like that, I agree with that. Like me doing my devotionals and like walking with the deities, they cover the buffer for a lot of the crap. Like I don't have to take somebody to the altar or do anything like that. It just, I don't have to worry about the protection or, do prosperity workings or something. It just shows up when I need it.
Right.
Yeah, I don't even know if this is still a thing or not, but back when I was first getting into it, the tradition, at least in my tradition, was that the Sabbaths were kind of almost spell free. I mean, somebody might do it, but they were mostly devotional and celebrational in nature. And it was the Esbats that would then be devoted to.
Esbats were for magic.
Yeah, they were for the actual magical working.
I'm a big theurg. We always tried to make sure our Sabbaths were theurgic, even if not. But we didn't do spellcraft. We didn't do spells at Sabbaths. You just wanted to get the Beltane blessing or the Lunasa blessing, and that's still how we do. Well, we make some space in our big public rites for people to come forward and quietly ask for what they want.
Right.
Now I got another question for you guys. As male witches, is it hard for you to draw down the lady to, be lunified?
No.
Is it hard for any of you guys?
Not a thing in what we do.
No, I'll flip that because in Norse paganism, the moon is a male god for us. So when I work with solar energy, which is our feminine, I don't have any issues drawing her down, but it is flipped for us.
I've never done oracular or speak from me work with a female deity. I've not done it much. I've not done it much. I did it some with our Wiccan version of the Horn God back when we did Wicca, and I have done it on a theurgic level with the Dagda a couple of times.
Yeah.
But it's not something we do all the time.
So I've done it with
I
Freya
go old school. The Star of Inanna.
Yeah, I think for me, of course, I will confess to being a cisgen male. So, in the old traditions, it was a lot about the polarities, the yin and the yang. But having said that, I think each person, whether they're male or female or whatever, even if they're non-binary, every person has the yin and the yang. Every person has the masculine and the feminine energy within them. And I've never particularly found it difficult to interact or evoke the feminine energy within me, even though I still feel that I remain a cisgen male as I do it. It's just, I feel we are all, if you exclude one side of like the masculine or the feminine, when you exclude that from yourself, and I'm just a dude, so I'm just masculine. You're cutting yourself off, and you're only half of a person. So, yeah, that's no problem.
Do you guys believe in solar rituals?
The what rituals?
Solar rituals, going out and
So,
drawing out.
Sun rituals. Yeah.
yes.
It's a huge thing in Norse paganism, where because obviously in the northern countries the sun is more of a rarity. So when we do get a chance to venerate the sun, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean it's seasonal, of course, and in the sun's season we worship the sun. I mean, for us, we're straight polytheists. The gods dance through the 8 holidays. We probably offer to 10 gods in the course of a year, and goddesses, male and female deities. We don't have any sense at all of the god and the goddess. That just is not a thing in traditional European paganism.
As a polytheist, I work through the whole pantheon.
Goddess, the primary deity of our house and hearth here is Bridget. We're singers. I'm an artist. We're land keepers.
Happy birthday.
Pardon? Yeah. So I mean, female energy. We work with goddesses here. A goddess is just a person who happens to be female. There's no. I don't make any important distinction of person between or kind between a goddess and a god.
No, I wouldn't even say it's a person that happens to be female. It's an energy that has more feminine traits than masculine. The warrior goddess part of the Morrigan or the Sekhmet. That's
deities as persons, not energies.
Old school mama bear stuff, Anat.
Yeah.
I think there's a danger though in
that was the warrior
women
spirit.
just embracing the warrior version of the goddess. Because there's also the nurturing part of the goddess as well, just as there is a nurturing part of the god. And we need, we're making a mistake to equate power.
That's why the goddess
with aggression. All of it. And power, power is only for the warrior class. That's not true. Power also comes with like I said, the nurturing. We don't more normally think of that as a more feminine trait, but it goes across both feminine and masculine. And there can be, an acceptance of weakness, of frailty, of for men, there's this incredibly empowering thing about feminism where we can actually reach out and ask for help.
Yeah, the vulnerability. Absolutely.
And that did not exist under patriarchy. Under patriarchy, it was like men were supposed to be so strong that they could do it all on their own and never have to ask for help. And, that was what was expected of them. If we embrace the feminine, then, or femininity, or, the matriarchal, that frees men and makes them fuller persons.
Yes. Though, in terms of post-Jungian thinking about all this, people say man up or woman up. To me, what it comes down to is grow up. When we say be a man, we don't mean be masculine. We mean be an adult.
Mm-hmm.
Go to your job. Support your family. Protect people when they need protected. Those are all things that women should do. There is no reason at all for a division of labor between the genders. There is no reason.
I couldn't agree more.
No reason at all for men to be protectors and women to be nurturers. Individual men may be protectors. Individual women may be nurturers, but it varies widely.
How much do I have to fight to fucking open this place?
I'm preaching.
What the fuck?
Now. We're done, aren't we? My wife's waiting in the other room. It's 10:30. Anyway.
Yeah, I can
Oops,
understand.
I'm sorry. I forgot that my mic was live. I forgot that I was in the live feed when I was trying to open up.
But the
Sorry about
generation
that.
of male and female energies for magic purposes is one thing, but it should not be mistaken for
For living.
how society ought to run.
Exactly.
Wow.
And like even in Norse paganism, we have a term that I absolutely hate that's ergi.
I knew where
And
you were going.
it the implication that men who are disposed to femininity are weak and lesser. And I absolutely hate it. It is originally a slur in the original practices, and it weirdly, just as much in the LGBT community, has kind of made a flip and become a this beautiful thing where they're reclaiming it, and I do kind of love it. I have a love-hate relationship with it, and there's still so many people in Norse paganism that hold this stigma, and I think
Yeah.
that's part of the reason that a lot of men in Norse paganism don't dive into any of the like quote unquote witchcraft practices. They'll go to the ritual, they'll observe religiously, but they don't delve in anything besides maybe runes. And I think it's sad. It's really sad.
Well, I'm sorry that there hasn't been more Gald developed among the Norse. That's men's magic is Gald.
Well, Kedrick Olson's done some great work with reviving Galder.
But Indo-European attitudes toward homosexuality were a spectrum. Greeks kind of liked it. Romans put up with it, but didn't really approve of it. Looks like Celts really kind of liked it. And warriors slept with each other on the campaign trail and had war buddies.
The moral support. Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, and by the way, although they're along the southern coast of the Mediterranean, Sparta was all into war buddies. But then you get up into the Germans, and the Germans seem to actually not like it. The Germans seem to develop a sense, especially and in every case, that taking the bottom position.
Yeah, they had it was specifically. It was just that because you could
unmanly.
Women could have equal relationships, and in some cases, it was common for kind of a polyamorous structure, where if you had a woman who you employed to help with the cooking and you were married to another woman, if you or your wife and your maid, for lack of a better term, had the proclivity that was okay, and I mean that was culturally acceptable at the time, but it was not acceptable at all for the males.
Monogamy? No, none of these people had strict monogamy, really. The Romans tried under Augustus, but they couldn't make it.
But for specifically like homosexual relationships, there was a stigma, and for the people that don't know, when you're labeled as, or ergi was not just a title and a punishment, but also you were socially treated as a woman in a sense, where and that in modern times is not a bad thing, but it changed your dynamic drastically.
Right.
Wow. I didn't know that. I didn't know that at all.
Because women dealt with finances, and held land, but the men had much different roles.
Ran the day to day in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
That's another, that same spectrum. The Greeks veiled their women. The veil that Islam uses now started in pagan Greece. The Romans gave their women more freedom. Celts and Germans, women actually held land and titles and could divorce freely. and had more freedom. Women actually had more legal rights in the North than they did in the Mediterranean.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, divorce was a simple proclamation. You had to go to the town center and proclaim that you were leaving them and why, and that could be done by either party.
Right.
And that was the whole process.
All right, my friends, it is 10:30 Eastern Time, and that gets perilously close to my antique fellow bedtime.
Yeah.
I know my wife is blinking on the couch in the other room. So,
Ian, where are you, by the way?
Pardon?
Ian, where are you?
I am in northeastern Ohio, about a mile and a half off of the shore of Lake Erie, an hour east of Cleveland, on 17 acres here that we call Tradara, where our grove has its outdoor temple, and we meet. Currently, we're meeting in a rented site in the metro parks because it's hard winter and we're not really a Four Seasons deal, but we'll be back here at May Day. If you ever get a chance to come out to
I'm not far away over in
Ohio's lousy with witches.
I'm Western Illinois, so
well, gentlemen,
I'm northwestern Illinois, so I'm in that same belt of weather.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, we're about to get the deep freeze here next week. It's actually been a cold winter. After 2 or 3 years of very mild winters, we're actually getting a cold winter.
Yep, Mr. Groundhog was right.
Better than the summers, some of the summers we've had.
There's always 6 more weeks of winter.
It keeps getting later and later.
You're lucky if the freeze is off the ground by St. Patrick's Day. And if it doesn't snow for St. Patrick's Day, I don't think I'm at home. All right, bless you all.
But it's the equinox, man.
we're just 15% off the old British seasons here in northeastern Ohio. Nobody's sowing mid-February. Not even a quick winter wheat crop here.
No. I have 6 inches of snow here.
Stepping outside if I can.
We have it here in Kansas City as well.
The cold weather has frozen the lake, and so lake effect snow has stopped cranking on us. Bless you all. I am
Yeah, don't wait to play pool.
This time for sure. I'm out of here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you. You have a nice evening, Mike. Ian.
Good to meet you, Mike Nichols. Like to meet you in person sometime. Come to Starwood. Every living person should come to Starwood. You have a good day.
You too. Thank you so much. Thank you all very much
to see him.
for being on the show.
Really great to see him. I've been talking to him for years and I never saw his face.
Well, I'm glad that you got to meet him, and put a face to him. Mike, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and thank you very much for asking me to be on. Appreciate it.
To me, I feel very, very blessed to have each one of you guys join us, for the podcast and all that. And, every time I get in front of people like Mike and you, Eric, I'm like starstruck. Knowledge-wise, I feel like this. But, every time I talk to each one of you guys, I grow. Wisdom-wise, I grow. And I thank you and bless you for that.
Thunder, you gotta give yourself more credit. You're a well of knowledge.
Yeah, but you know what? One thing I've learned in life: be humble.
You're well of experience. I mean, you guys been trying to run stuff in Carlville and Iowa City, trying to get stuff started. And if I had a car, I'd be supporting you. And that's the only thing that's keeping me from supporting you guys.
Well, you know what? Your well wishes is a thank you to you. Thank you so much. Who what? Do you remember Salisbury Campground? Eric, do you remember that? Yeah, that was years ago. Years and years ago.
Yeah, it wasn't my best day.
Well, it wasn't my best
day, but it was a day.
But thank you all so much. I really appreciate your time and, to come and join us. And Nico, I love you, brother.
Love you too. Well, I'm
Thank you so
obligated to
much.
be here. You're my cousin.
Wow.
If you're talking about what I think you're talking about, Salisbury, Mabinfest.
Yeah.
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 I was at the Mabinfest. No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's not for public.
But do you guys got anything to say before we
It's
leave?
now we're getting to like local pagan politics.
Yeah, but that's what makes the roots grow, brother. You know what I'm saying? How many kids did we impact that day?
It's
How many
true,
people? That to me, that's what's important.
Well, that's the thing is like I'm really gratified that I've been able to like make it have an effect in Rock Island. Now, once I crossed the river, Davenport to Rock Island,
yeah,
everything exploded.
But I just want to say I love you all. Thank you for being part of my life. Thank you for being within the cauldron. And may we always transform from that cauldron. Blessed be everyone.
Blessed be. Thank you.
A group of people that are dedicated and stay with you throughout the course of an entire year. The wheel of the year was very gratifying to me.
There's the red button up in the corner.
What was most gratifying to me was the fact that it was rewarding for them.
Oh yeah.